This is a story about the Civil War diary of John Newton Prentice, who was a private in Company A of the 57th Illinois Volunteer Infantry from 1862 until the end of the Civil War in 1865. This is an image of the diaries, which apparently were hidden in the Prentice family archives for 160 years or so until I learned about them in 2021 from my aunt, my late mother's youngest sister. In this talk, I'm going to describe the process used to transcribe the diaries into a readable form and also the historical context that was researched in order to make the diary entries more meaningful. This is a picture of the man who wrote these diaries. As we said, he was a private in Company A of the 57th Illinois Volunteer Infantry between 1861 and 1865. He was my mother's paternal grandfather. The 57th Illinois Volunteer Infantry Regiment was formed in response to an 1861 call by President Lincoln for 300,000 troops. Company A, which was John N. Prentice's company, was enlisted with headquarters at Mendota, Illinois. Mendota is a small farming community about 80 miles west of Chicago, close to John Prentice's hometown of Paw Paw, Illinois. The remaining companies of the 57th Regiment were largely from the city of Chicago. Here's a diary entry by John Prentice on January 13, 1862. Today received my certificate of enlistment and to show my rank in the Army. 975 men mustered into the 57th Regiment in 1861. Of those, there'd be 180 fatalities, 68 killed, and 112 by disease. They were in the service for 3.5 years, from 1861 to 1865, and took part in more than 15 major battles and campaigns. This is a fairly typical page out of one of the diaries. As you can see, they're water stained, they're fragile, somewhat difficult to read. The process I used to transcribe the diaries was to scan them into a JPEG image and then enhance that image using Photoshop. It also helped me transcribe the diaries to research historical context and locations to help put the diary entries into their proper perspective. The final product was a booklet, as shown in this image, with each page from the diary and then my transcribed diary entries. John Prentice was really good about putting locations in his diaries. It really helped with the transcription and looking up the historical context. In addition to locations, nearly every page mentions one or more of these main themes. Drilling. They spent a lot of time drilling. Company drills, regimental drills, battalion drills. Mail and news are mentioned often. You can tell how that was high on their importance. There's an excellent book here by Candace Shy Hooper that describes how the mail could be delivered to these soldiers in the unlikeliest of places and the toughest of conditions. And news from the North was important to them. They didn't get a lot of information from above, and they depended on hometown newspapers and northern newspapers. Faith and family were important. John went to church at least once every Sunday, it looks like, and often put an entry in his diary, whether it was good preaching or a good discussion afterwards. Hard work is mentioned. The hard work is every day, building, marching, fighting, building railroads, tearing up railroads. And picket duty. Picket duty is one of the most frequently mentioned items in the diary. To me, picket's something you did with your horse at night when you were camping. You tie him to a picket line. But in this context, it's groups of 20 or so soldiers that get sent out in advance of the main battle lines to scout for the enemy, find their locations, often skirmish with them, and try to bring back information. His terms for battle were usually skirmishing and cannonading. Hunger was ever present. I grew up thinking the reason the North won the war, or the main reason, was they were so much better provisioned than the South. But these troops spent a lot of time foraging for themselves and on short rations. And in the wintertime, foraging was not real productive. A lot of entries in the diary about sickness and death, often people he knew. And weather was ever present. They were living out in the elements for 3.5 years and saw all the kinds of weather that the South could throw at them. And that's often mentioned in the diary. What I'm going to do now is go through each year covered by the diaries and read some selected entries from the diaries. But first, for each year, I'll provide some historical background as to the major events and locations visited by the 57th Regiment during that year, which to me made the diary entries much more meaningful. The year 1862 begins in Camp Douglas on the east side of Chicago, where they have what you might call basic training. Here's Paw Paw, Illinois, John Prentice's hometown. Company A headquarters of Mendota were down here, right here, just a little south and west of Paw Paw. After their basic training, the regiment left by rail for Cairo, Illinois, then went by riverboat up the Cumberland River to where they had their first combat at Fort Donelson. They then went on up the river further to a place called Pittsburgh Landing, which is where the Battle of Shiloh was fought. The goal was the town of Corinth, Mississippi, a town on a major east-west and north-south rail line, and both sides wanted control of that railroad crossroads for strategic purposes. April through September were taken up with the siege of Corinth, both sides fighting for control of the town. In October, they had the major Battle of Corinth, in which the North prevailed, and began about a year of what they call the occupation of Corinth. Here are a few diary entries from 1862. January 28, received our arms today. The day has been stormy and gloomy to a great extent. I need to mention here that received the arms. The arms that the infantry got were basically Revolutionary War era flintlock muskets from the Harper's Ferry arsenal. And they performed very badly in their first combat, which was at Fort Donelson in snow and rainy weather. February 8th, left Chicago for Cairo today. February 15th, the rebels attacked us this morning. February 17th, I find myself in the hospital. I need to mention here that many members of the regiment fell ill after the Battle of Fort Donelson, and John Prentice and some others were sent home on furlough, which was lucky for him, and I think probably lucky for me and the other descendants of John Prentice, because he missed the Battle of Shiloh, which was the biggest battle of the war up to that point, with nearly 24,000 casualties on both sides. April 16, we have company drill every morning, battalion drill in the afternoon, and dress parade in the evening. May 12th, I have been out to help build road in advance of the picket to get ready to advance. May 28th had a sharp skirmish today, which resulted in the capture of the rebel batteries. Have thrown up earthworks tonight. June 7th, have been on picket today. Had a talk with a citizen on the war. He often did that and has many diary entries about it. He liked to go out and visit with what he called citizens, civilians, about the status of the war. July 15, another of our companions in arms has been buried today. Received a letter from Martha. August 13th, it is next to impossible to get plenty of good water. August 15, am on guard at General Grant's headquarters. August 27, have been to the town of Corinth for the first time and have seen the elephant. This one stumped me for a little while when I was transcribing these diaries. I didn't think there were elephants in Mississippi, but I looked it up on the web, and that was an Americanism of the time, and it symbolized people who had gone through some great hardship to see a particular site. Then they could say they'd seen the elephant. September 5th, have had a drill at standing guard, being we do not have the reality. I think there's a little sarcasm in that statement. September 16, received orders to march at a moment's warning. Various rumors in camp today. September 25th, have attended a Negro funeral, which was quite interesting. In October, during the occupation of Corinth, there was a battle a short ways east of Corinth on the railroad called the Battle of Iuka, in which the North took about 2,000 prisoners. John Prentice and others from the regiment were ordered to Vicksburg with 1,600 of these prisoners to exchange them for 500 paroled federal prisoners, which they took to St. Louis, and they rejoined their regiment on November 5th. Here are some diary entries from late 1862. October 9th, started for Columbus, Kentucky to guard a train of prisoners at 3 a.m. October 12th, we are stopping at Memphis, taking on coal and provisions, preparatory for going to Vicksburg. October 18, arrive at the landing at 12 in noon. Completed the exchange of prisoners this evening. December 25th, no train from the north yet, and we have to spend Christmas on half rations and nearly out of that. December 31, am on picket today. We are still on half rations, but the boys have got some geese in the country for a New Year dinner. We expect that we shall get news and supplies soon. Most of 1863 was taken up with the continued occupation of Corinth. The regiment spent a lot of time building barracks to house the troops and making forays out from Corinth to protect the communication lines and transportation lines or to restore them when they got torn up. There was quite a bit of skirmishing up and down the railroad. But by late in the year, in October, they moved to Linville, Tennessee. They went by rail from Corinth and then marched about 120 miles to where they had planned to spend the winter in Linville, Tennessee. Here are some diary entries from 1863. January 2nd, we have finished our last rations, and some of the boys are grinding corn in the coffee mill to make bread for breakfast. January 4th, I'm on picket today. We get nothing to eat but a little cornmeal and fresh meat that we foraged. The mail came from Columbus this morning. January 11, a wagon train consisting of all the teams in camp started for Hamburg for provisions, and our regiment with two others go along to guard it. We were in camp at Hamburg tonight. Hamburg's about 20 miles from Corinth on the river. January 16, Moses Higgins died last evening at 8 o'clock and was buried this afternoon. The weather is very cold today. February 3rd, was detailed this morning as nurse in the hospital and report this afternoon. February 11, I am in the hospital yet as nurse. Went over to the camp this afternoon but found the boys gone. and it is quite lonesome here. Our regiment came back to camp this eve at 5 o'clock. February 15th, I am very busy today and was last evening at occupying my spare time, as Ole is worse and others are very sick. I find that it is not easy work to wait upon the sick in hospital. February 18th, Ole Olesen died at 10 minutes before 4 o'clock this morning after 2 months of illness and a great deal of suffering. Olesen was buried at 3 o'clock this afternoon. February 19th, our regiment received orders to march in the morning with 5 days' rations. I am having easier times now than for a few days back. March 1, went to church at 11 o'clock and listened to a splendid discourse from the text, which shall be to all people. Went to church again this evening at the music hall. March 30, signed the payrolls today prior to being paid for the months of November, December, and January. April 2nd, we commenced to cut timber and clear up campground for building barracks for summer quarters. April 20, we are still bivouacked 2 miles east of Bears Creek, waiting for reinforcements before advancing. Have bought some cornbread of a citizen for supper. April 28, near Town Creek. The rebels are shelling us this morning. Our artillery is replying briskly, after nearly all day is driving the rebels from the creek. Our men succeeded to put a bridge across, and the infantry have crossed and have possession of the hills opposite. Some skirmishing with the rebels. In the margin, the mail came in today. May 18th, am at work on the barracks, putting on the roof. June 11th, today we have followed another of our brave comrades to the grave after a short illness. Thus our ranks are growing thinned. Received the first copy of the Mendota Bulletin. June 30, we have general inspection and muster for pay today. My appointment as sergeant is from this day. July 6, went to the woods to cut shingles and had a glorious time eating blackberries. It is very warm weather to work. The news arrived that Vicksburg has been taken on the 4th. July 8, Rady's cavalry are near here with quite a large force and are annoying our men considerable. We have skirmish drill at 6 p.m. August 1, went out to guard the mules while they feed on grass near our old camping ground and found a lot of blackberries, also a ripe peach. Cleaned up camp this afternoon. August 7, have assisted in the burial of a little child of a Southern man who was in the U.S. service. The second lieutenant of Company D was buried this evening after a short illness. September 6, I am taking care of McNutt today. Inspection at 9 a.m. Dress parade at 6 p.m. I am sitting this eve where I can gaze up on the old flag, and pleasant thoughts are in my mind. How beautiful that emblem of peace. There's an image of the 34-star flag of the United States that was in effect during the Civil War. September 26, am on camp guard today. Our regiment have turned over their old arms and drawn new Springfield rifled muskets. September 29, the 1st Brigade of the 1st Division of Sherman's Army Corps came in here this morning, and this evening the 2nd Brigade is coming into this place. I have set for some photographs today in town. Received a letter from Aunt Sarah. October 16, took up the line of march at 7 a.m. Passed through Behalia at 11 a.m. Halted and went into camp 7 miles north of Collierville at 1 p.m. Went out to forage potatoes and chickens, etc. for supper. Had a great meal, I think. November 18, mounted a mule this morning and went out into the country with the major to get a blacksmith's help and coal. Captured 4 guerrillas' horses hitched to a fence. 1864. In 1864, on January 17th, while they were still encamped at their winter quarters at Linville, Tennessee, most of the 57th Regiment enlisted for 3 more years of service. They started the next day for Chicago on veteran furlough of 30 days, arriving the 27th. While there, they recruited nearly 250 men, raising their numbers to over 500. And they left Chicago on March 9th to return south and arrived at Athens, Alabama. While they were gone, their regiment had moved from Linville, Tennessee to Athens, Alabama. 1864 and 1865 saw some of the fiercest fighting of the war, including the siege and burning of Atlanta and Sherman's march to the sea. They begin when he rejoined his troops on the 13th of March in Athens, Alabama, and they marched, the 57th Regiment marched in this direction through Chattanooga. They spent a night at the old campground of the Chickamauga battleground, and then went on to Rome, Georgia, through Atlanta for the siege and burning of Atlanta, and then the Sherman's march to the sea down to Savannah. They ended the year in Savannah. Total distance march from Athens to Savannah is about 550 miles. The last leg of it from Atlanta down to Savannah they did in about the last 2 months of the year. Here are some diary entries from 1864. April 30, Athens. Started from Athens with the brigade this morning at 7 a.m. It is very rainy and muddy. Went into camp at 2 p.m. May 2nd. Started from Huntsville at 5 a.m. It is very hard marching. Halted for the night at 4 p.m. after going 17 miles. Our feet are very sore. May 6, we had a sharp fight with the rebels this afternoon near Calhoun at Rome Crossroads. May 9, 4 p.m., we came upon the rebels at the railroad in some force. Have had some quite hard fighting with a loss of about 20 per side. 6 p.m., a line of battle is formed and our company is thrown out as skirmishers. 6:30 p.m., considerable skirmishing is now going on. The place is on the railroad 14 miles south of Dalton. The rebels have considerable force at this place. At dark, we fall back from this place about 5 miles, go into camp at 11:30 p.m. May 11 and 12, we are getting only very much reduced rations and are getting quite thin in our bellies. May 14, skirmishing commenced at daylight, cannonading at 5:30 a.m. At 10 a.m., our division starts for the ferry south of Resaca. 9:30 p.m., the most terrific fighting is now going on. June 29th, I have been out on a foraging expedition today. Took dinner at a family's table once more. Arrived in camp at 9 p.m. Blackberries are getting ripe and I found plenty. When I arrived in camp, I found a letter from Aunt Sarah. July 12th, as I was out foraging today, I stopped to talk with a lady. She called us soldiers a motley set of Dutch and Irish and ought to be at home harvesting wheat or something of the kind, instead of being down here trying to subjugate the Southern people. She says no wonder we have so many men at home when our army is composed of such men, while the natives stay at home. July 26, still heavy fighting in Atlanta. September 3rd, after breakfast and feeding horses, we started for Rome, arriving at 9 p.m. We learned that Atlanta is taken by Sherman. October 5th, the river battle at Allatoona is fought today with a loss to us of 706 men and to the rebels of at least 1,000 men. October 6th, we are resting today after the severe fighting of yesterday. Our dead are being buried today. Company A lost 5 men. Our loss is very heavy. Our wounded are sent to Rome on the train. After the fall of Atlanta, We begin Sherman's march to the sea, the scorched earth march, a 60-mile wide swath from Atlanta to Savannah, about a 300-mile distance in a little less than 2 months marching. November 11th, Rome is evacuated at 7 a.m. We take up the line of march at 7 a.m., stop 2 miles south of Kingston for dinner, went into camp for night at 5 p.m., draw rations for 2 days. November 15th, our forces are evacuating Atlanta and burning most of the town. November 18, we lay in camp all day waiting for the 17th Corps to pass. Start out at 2 p.m., pass through town of Jackson at 10 p.m. We are very much fatigued. November 19, go into camp at 1:30 a.m., start again at 7 a.m. Halt at Okmulgee Mills on the river at 10 a.m. It rains this morning. Our company is at work pulling out cotton from sheds and burning it. Rain. November 27, move out to the railroad at 7 a.m. and commence to tear it up and burn it. We burn about 5 miles and go into camp at 3 p.m. at Oconee Station. Weather fine. They tore up a lot of railroad to try to keep the rebels from being able to use it and to make it harder for them to put it back. What they would do is tear up the railroad, pile the ties and set them on fire, and then put rails on top and melt them till they were flexible and twist them into pretzel shapes. They called them Sherman's bow ties or Sherman's neckties. When we're talking about this 300-mile march to the sea, bear in mind that the infantry soldiers carried 40 to 60 pounds of gear. The rifle and bayonet alone weighed 10 pounds. They carried a cartridge box with 40 rounds of ammunition. Sometimes his diary mentioned that he received 60 rounds of ammunition. They had a haversack, canteen, and a rubber blanket, a shelter half, wool blanket, and extra clothing. Shelter half was a new term to me. Each soldier was issued a shelter half, and then 2 soldiers would put their halves together and it would make a 2-man pup tent to sleep in. And they also carried whatever personal items they wanted. We know that John Prentice at least carried a pencil and a diary. December 15th, heavy skirmishing at daylight. 8 a.m., heavy cannonading. Slight skirmishing the remainder of the day. I get 1 pound of cornmeal, which is to last 2 days. December 21, Savannah is evacuated by the rebels. The federal forces take possession of the city and forts. December 23rd, we get lumber to fix up camp today. More supplies came up the river today. The mail came in once more. Rebels fire into our transports. December 26th, it is rainy this morning. Write to Mary and Julia. 1 year ago, I re-enlisted. No hardtack yet. The non-veterans get their discharge. Enclose this book to send home. 1865 includes the Carolinas campaign, the war's end, and the trip home. They begin the year in Savannah and had trouble getting out of Savannah because of weather. It rained so much. All the rivers in this area run to the sea, and they had to cross them all, and they were in flood. They had to turn back many times. It was February before they got started. They had to fight and work their way along. They often had to build pontoon bridges to cross the rivers. When they got to about Raleigh, it looks like about halfway to Washington, D.C., is where the 57th Regiment was when the war ended. From there, then, they marched about 270 miles to Alexandria, Virginia, where at the end of May, they took part in the Grand Review. Here are some diaries from 1865, diary entries. February 4th, the rain has ceased to fall, but it is still cloudy. 10 a.m. We get orders to be ready to march at 1 p.m. Write a hurried letter to Helen. We march at 4 p.m., cross the Savannah River at 7 p.m. into South Carolina. Camp at 10 p.m., 3 miles from the ferry. The night is very foggy. February 20th, we move at 7 a.m. Our direction is nearly northeast. March 20 miles. We pass through a barren, sandy, hilly country and suffer for want of water, the day being warm. Go into camp at 5 p.m. Nearly all of Columbia is burned to the ground. February 21, resume the march at 6:30 a.m. Our course is nearly due north. We march at least 20 miles. The country passed through today is more fertile, considerable hilly. We are all very tired. Go into camp at 4 p.m. Many refugees are going along with us. No enemy discovered in front. We are camped near Winnsboro. February 26, we have to wade Lynch's River, which is a quarter-mile wide at the present time, and waist deep nearly all the way. The teams get fast in the river, and our company, with others, have to go into the water again to get them out. Many wagons remain in the water all night. A small force of rebels are near here. March 6th, we still remain on Provost Guard. The powder mill was blown up, killing 5 soldiers and wounding 10, also 1 or more citizens. Have a talk with a young lady upon the war. Received a letter from Mary. Troops are crossing the river all night. We have destroyed large amounts of ordnance stores. March 23rd, take up the line of march in the direction of Goldsboro at 6 a.m. Crossed Falling Creek at 3 p.m. and went into camp near there and 10 miles from Goldsboro. My shoes are worn out and I am compelled to go barefoot the rest of the war. April 6th, I am on picket guard. The 4th have brigade and division review. We get the glorious news that Richmond has fallen and many prisoners had fallen into our hands. April 12th, we resume the march at 8 a.m. 11 a.m. we are halted and an order is read to us stating that General Lee surrendered his entire army to General Grant. 3 cheers. We halt at Long Mills for rest and dinner. Go into camp at 9 p.m. We march 14 miles today. April 17th, start out on a forage trip today. Further negotiations are going on at our front. We learned through what is supposed to be a reliable source that the President of the U.S. was killed by an assassin the night of the 11th. April 28th, near Raleigh, North Carolina. I am on camp guard. Company drill at 9 a.m. Company drill at 3 p.m. Dress parade at 3:30 p.m. We get orders to be ready to march at 5 o'clock in the morning. Write to Daniel and Edward. They marched on to Washington, D.C., and now comes the grand review. May 24th, we move out at 7 a.m. A grand review of General Sherman's army takes place today. The 15th Corps is the advance army at the Capitol building at 9 a.m., passing down Pennsylvania Avenue past the White House where the reviewing officers are. Go into camp. It's my understanding from reading about the grand review that the reviewing officers he mentions include the President, the Vice President, General Grant, General Sherman, and General Meade, among others. The trip home. The trip home of about 1,000 miles was partly by rail. They left Alexandria, Virginia by rail, went through to Parkersburg, West Virginia by rail, and took a boat down the Ohio River then to a big camp in Louisville where they stayed for several days, then crossed the Ohio River on ferry and took the train home to Camp Douglas, and then eventually back to Paw Paw. Here are some diary entries from the trip home. June 5th, we crossed the Allegheny Mountain early this morning, passed over the highest ridge in the Alleghenies at 2 p.m., at the summit of which is the Kingwood Tunnel, which is 7/8 of a mile through. This is the steepest grade of railroad I ever saw. Get coffee at Valley Station. Passed through at least 20 tunnels today. June 7, on board Transport Champion. We have been laying over all night. Start on at 4 a.m. Pass Ironton at 9 a.m. Pass Maysville, Kentucky, 3 p.m. The people line the shore all the way down the river and wave flags, handkerchiefs, and give cheer after cheer as each boat loaded with soldiers passes. Past Ripley, Ohio at 4 p.m. Large fields of grapes are cultivated along the river. We land opposite Cincinnati for coal, and I with others get left behind. Cross over the river and stay at Cincinnati all night. June 11th, company inspection at 9 a.m. The day is very warm. We're still in camp here in Louisville. We are very lonely here in camp. We do not feel patriotic enough to soldier after the war is over. I think there will be trouble in camp if we stay here long. July 6th, still at work on the rolls. Complete them at 3 p.m. and are sent immediately to the mustering officer. We are mustered out of the U.S. service to date the 7th or tomorrow. The boys illuminate the camp with all the candles they can get. July 7th, we strike the tents at 5 a.m. for the Portland Ferry and cross the river at 9 a.m. Leave New Albany at 11 a.m. by the Louisville, New Albany, and Chicago Railroad. Arrive at Bloomington at 7 p.m. Leave at 10 p.m. The day is very warm, as have been several of late. July 8, arrive at Lafayette, Indiana at 6:30 a.m. Change cars and are detained 2 hours. Arrive at Michigan City at 5 p.m. Arrive at Camp Douglas, Chicago at 9 p.m. and are to remain until paid. July 13, we get our pay and discharge at 10 a.m. I take the 1:30 p.m. train and arrive home at 9 p.m. Find the folks all well. A joyful meeting to us all. July 14, thus I am transformed to a citizen again after nearly 4 years of a soldier's life. This is the John N. Prentice home, which I visited in November of 2021 when I went back to get the missing diaries. From his obituary, I learned that John N. Prentice, after the Civil War, worked for the American Bridge Company in Chicago for about 4 years, and then moved back home to a farm south of Paw Paw, where he farmed for about 25 years. He built this house in 1890 and moved into it in 1892 and lived there until his death in 1912. Here's a picture of the John Prentice family. This is John, the man who wrote the diaries. His wife, Mary Jeanette, who immigrated from Norway, and their children. This one here is my grandfather, Arthur C. Prentice. With that, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have.